Me? I'm more of a cat person myself. My name is Matthew Kroll.
And TikTok, Mr. Wick, TikTok. My name is Shahir Dowd.
And this is the only podcast about movies, specifically the film John Wick, Chapter 3, a Parabellum.
Parabellum?
Parabellum. Woo!
I feel like we've finally gotten onto a train that you've been dying to jump on ever since the beginning of this podcast.
If this was a train I'd be jumping on, then I'd jump off it, but I'd catch it with a grappling hook and I'd swing back through it. Then I'd kick someone through a window, and then I'd take one of the bars from the inside of the train and spin it around like a bow staff, and then stab it through someone's foot so they're stuck and punch them in the head, knocking someone else back. And I just came up with that on the top of my head because I'm so amped up about John fucking Wick.
Here's my pitch. You just keep doing that for the next hour. I'll go wait in the other room.
Okay, so scene opens. Guns.
Lots of guns. Before we get to John Wick, I want to read out some emails from our last episode, which is the complete antithesis of John Wick. We talked a little bit about slow cinema last week in our episode about Bygone's film Long Day's Journey into Night. We've had a couple of emails about it. As always, you can email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod. There was an interesting thing that happened in that conversation, and I think this might need some context, but basically, as we were having that conversation, there was a couple of things I pointed out about the slow cinema movement that I think I posted on our Twitter feed a couple of video essays about that.
Yes.
Which is a really interesting, fascinating movement. But we've had some emails because there was a point at which you and I kind of felt like we were on two different trains. I feel like we were talking about two different things, and people have responded to this.
Okay,
which I think is fun. First up from The Blade. The Blade says, I get where Matt's coming from. There's not a movie that I've seen that hasn't been moved forward or backwards on the scale of appreciation by my state of mind at the time. I've tried the fake it till you make it method before, and it usually doesn't work for me. Thank you, The Blade. Again, more context. Do you want to explain what it wasn't? I don't think it was a disagreement. I think we were just talking about two different things.
First and foremost, I just want to say thank you, Jonathan. And that's a little thank you and a John Wick reference. No, I mean, we were just talking about we got into, oh my God, I can't believe we did this, but a semantic argument.
I'm always up for semantics. I've used that joke so many times. I'll be here all week. Thank you.
What was the joke?
I'm always up for semantics.
Oh, for some antics. I get it.
Wow, I've used that joke like 4 or 5 times.
I must have just blocked them all out of my mind. No, we were just talking about the difference between, like, I brought up, which was kind of a side discussion. I went off the rails. I will say that. And while I appreciate The Blade coming to my back and agreeing with the side track that I took us on, I did move us in a direction that was not exactly the full point, I think, of what you were talking about. And I basically was talking about, like, the mood or the place that you are in your life will affect the way that you experience a film. That wasn't the point that you were making. I think it's has to do with, but was not the central thesis of what we were discussing.
Yeah.
But I'm glad. Hey, listen. I'm always up for that discussion.
Well, it's going to go on for a little bit here because it's not the Blade is not the only person who's emailed us about that.
What?
Jacob emails us in and has just listened to our episode on Long Day's Journey into Night and wanted to try to help explain Matthew's argument about mood affecting the perception of film.
Thank you,
which
Jacob.
Shahir didn't seem to relate to that much. Suggesting that you two have entirely different cognitive processes. Spoiler, I think you have similar processes but are focusing on a different aspect of it. So here's a thought experiment. You're both about to watch Die Hard for the first time, knowing very little about the film. In one universe, the love of your life, or so you thought, just broke up with you. In a parallel universe, you are just finished up playing the greatest game of laser tag and are a bit sweatier than you'd prefer. I think it's fairly non-controversial to say that your experience of Die Hard is going to be different in these two universes. So Matthew wins, slam dunk. The mood state of being that you are in when you see the film can vary, perhaps dramatically, based on the things that could be in your control.
Kablam!
But don't exactly make sense to control for when you're seeing a film. But wait.
What?
But wait.
What?
What if you, in the above scenario, is a hard-boiled veteran of the film industry, an expert in critique and analysis. No love of your life, or so you thought, is going to prevent you from being able to take the film on its own terms. Sweat, meat, pocket handkerchief, bam, Shahir steals the show for an easy layup.
Wait, hold on. So that's just if you are a soulless monster? Is that how it...
I mean,
okay.
I think that's what Jacob is saying. that I'm a is that wait no you're the expert hard-boiled veteran of the film industry, expert in critique analysis, right? And I'm the
I don't
what's the
think,
other one?
I don't
know.
yeah.
What was the other one?
You're the other one.
Okay. Going on from Jacob, I don't think slow cinema is exactly for him. He just watched the film called The Souvenir, which is by Joanna Hogg. I believe there's a really great podcast right now with an interview with Joanna Hogg and Martin Scorsese talking about The Souvenir.
Across the multiverse.
Yeah, exactly. Jacob continues, but I tend to enjoy slower pacing in the theaters than later in the future at home. So I might take a jaunt to see that 15-minute, 59 minutes. 59-minute sequence, which sounds super cool, albeit only in 2D in my option. If either of you has seen Columbus from 2017, starring John Cho and Haley Lou Richardson, I recall tending it to be a slower paced film. I saw Columbus based on a listener recommendation. It's one of my favorite films that I saw that year. I absolutely love that film. You should check it out if you haven't seen it yet. I think it perfectly exemplifies the notion of slow cinema. And the notion of slow cinema, again, we're getting into a little bit of a sidetrack here, is not necessarily just about the pace of shots and editing. It's also about narrative resolutions and staying within a moment without feeling the need to resolve a narrative through line, I think, can be part of that slow cinema experience. Whatever you think about it is, I think it was an interesting conversation. You should go back and listen to that episode.
Also, Jacob, straight up, I really liked this email. I was playing along like I hadn't read. Like I was reading it, and it was literally like penned like a roller coaster ride that I really enjoyed. No moment of it was slow, in my opinion. So thank you very much. You win the best narrative through line email we've ever gotten.
And we're sending you an existentialist hug right now.
Right now.
That's
Do
what
you feel
won.
it?
Yeah.
Do you feel it?
Let's sit here silently and enjoy it.
There it was. That was a good hug. And you know what? High five. You didn't see that coming, but there it was. Thank you so much for writing in. Everyone, please write us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or tweet at us at onlymoviepod for any other things you'd like to discuss.
Any enlightenment, any Zen, any Keanu Reeves-esque conversations about life, death, the afterlife.
I mean, I did just pour a whiskey for this because this is a whiskey sipping movie.
All right, let's I'll do brief history here. Is I saw John Wick for the first time, I believe it was last year, and I texted you when I saw it.
Yes.
So we had been doing the podcast. I didn't see part 2 and part 3 until this week in preparation for this episode, and I will tell you what my opinion of those films are. But Matt, I feel like you have history with these films.
Well, see, here's the thing. Not really.
You've seen them, though.
I've seen them, but I didn't seen 2 until last week.
Okay. So you'd only seen 1 up until
I'd only seen 1 up until last week, and then I had some friends over and we did a double feature. We rewatched 1 and I watched 2 for the first time.
Okay.
When John Wick 1 came out,
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated it, but I was not enamored by it.
I want to call it The Wickening.
The Wickening. I like it.
Yeah.
Get wicked. I think it took the stale revenge assassin trope and turned that particular frown upside down. It made it like it made something incredibly stale feel fresh again. It's the equivalent of nuking a bagel wrapped in a wet paper towel, and you can actually make it moist again.
All of those words sound disgusting.
Yeah,
right?
they are. But that's the thing. Here's the point.
This movie is so moist.
It shouldn't work, but it does.
Right.
And it does it through sheer style, through a little bit of mystery, but not the mystery of the plot, the mystery of the great world building that it does.
But mostly it's moisture.
And of course, these super moist action sequences, especially at the end of John Wick 1, they're fighting in the rain. It checks out. No, but like, the John Wick has always went back when the first one came out. It was super impressive. It didn't feel like any other action movie at the time because we'd kind of fallen into a bit of a lull of shaky cam nonsense at that point, and this felt so novel because it didn't do that. Like, it wasn't 19. I was watching, what was it? I was sort of boning up for this podcast.
Moist boning up. What are you doing?
I'm setting
What
them up.
are you
I'm
doing?
literally just laying them up for the most awful dad jokes you can throw.
I'm staying silent.
I know, but you're still referencing.
It's too sweaty in this room.
So, but like, I think it might have been Honest Trailers that brought this up. It's like, what's Liam Neeson gonna do now that that he doesn't have 15 cuts to show him jumping over a fence?
Right.
And Keanu Reeves is, he's had a very long and awesome career, in my opinion.
A lot of highs and lows, though.
Yeah,
a lot of lows recently. Like up until John Wick.
Sure.
The last big thing he'd done was The Matrix.
Yeah, but no one, I don't think, ever looks at a Keanu Reeves movie as like, oh, I don't like Keanu Reeves. Like that's he
47 Ronin didn't do much business. Henry's Crime.
That's fine, but you can't look. I've never heard someone when talking about films being like, I don't like Keanu Reeves. I've literally never heard it. So email us in.
Did you live through the 90s?
Email us in onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com. You tell me if you dislike Keanu Reeves. Anyway, John Wick was sort of a return to form. I mean, look, I like the meta narrative of the film itself and like the making of it. Obviously, the director is his old stunt guy from The Matrix.
So that's Chad Stahelski and David Leitch.
And
both of them were his stunt doubles.
And so they knew his body, and they knew sort of like they took what they excel at, and they made it even better. They furthered the art form of action cinema, in my opinion. Now, then cut to last week when I saw John Wick 2. I don't know why I didn't see John Wick 2 in the theater. It was one of those things, I feel like when John Wick came out, I was like, this is amazing, and it probably got brushed aside for something else I don't remember particularly. But it just, it elevated the story. There was a lot of stuff like they moved away from New York for a little bit, which again, I'm going to get into a little bit more about the New York centricities of these films. But I will say this. John Wick 2 felt shinier and more action-packed, but sort of didn't make me feel like the story was going anywhere. And when I saw the trailer for John Wick 3, this is before I saw John Wick 2.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, this just seems like you could put it at the end of John Wick 1 and have it still make sense.
Okay.
But again, I know the minutia of the plot that is not true.
Okay.
But it almost felt like chapter 2, was a side quest. And I have no problem with side quests. I loved watching the side quest. But now 3 is here.
Okay.
And the ballet of death, as I will call it, because there's literal ballerinas in this one. It's action movie perfection in a weird way. There's nothing to. It's all Flash giving you. It's a magician doing Flash, giving you the illusion of substance.
Right.
There's little to no substance in these films other than raw emotion at the basest level and the typical action movie tropes that you've seen time and time again. It's just executed incredibly well and with a certain flair that distracts you from the fact that you've seen this story a trillion times. Or it distracted me, I will say. I was cheering in the theater. I was having a great time. I went with some friends. The whole theater, we saw it maybe 5 days maybe after it was. People were still like being raucous in the theater at like a Wednesday evening showing. Viscerally, the classic things that during one of these movies or an action movie, we're just like, oh, like when something bad happens to somebody, or you cheer when something awesome happens. I think, God, the horse sequence, riding the horse against the motorcycles in I want to say that was the Bronx. Really, really did it for me. The new additions to the storyline, obviously Halle Berry and her 2 dogs. That whole fight scene was legit one of the coolest things I think I've actually watched. There's parts that I didn't enjoy, which I will sort of get into as we go along. But overall, I am shocked that that this is a franchise that I am now like actively pumped for.
What's shocking about that?
Well, like it almost, and I would say I'm more pumped for these than the next example I will give, but it almost did sort of a Fast and the Furious for me.
Mm-hmm.
And by that, I mean, the first one happened and I liked it a lot, but I must have not liked it a ton because I didn't really like actively go and see in the moment, the second one, the moment it came out. And then I got a little bit wrapped up in the hype, and it's elevated itself more and more and more, and now it's the quintessential thing that it is the quintessential thing of. I mean, for instance, like Fast and the Furious used to be a street racing movie.
Right.
And now it's just balls to the wall, nutty, save the world scenario, and they've embraced the silliness of it. This world, John Wick, doesn't have silliness per se, or not in the same way that Fast and the Furious does. It has I don't know if I'd call it, I'll have to coin something by the end of this podcast, but stylistic silliness in a sense where it's just dripping it's dripping just the amount of edgelord that you will not hate yourself for enjoying. And that's a tough knife edge to balance on, in my opinion. Shahir, you've been incredibly silent, and my whiskey's looking very good. What did you think of John Wick 3? Initial thoughts. Don't go too deep. Just go in like a fine murderous wine.
I'm very conflicted about John Wick 3, which is to say, yeah, I have a lot to say about this, about everything that you've just said, and a lot to say about this thing as a franchise and this thing as an example of where we're at in the world, kind of thing. I will say this: I found. I think in order to put it in context, I have to talk about my reaction to John Wick 1 through 3 to get to the point where we're at 3. So my reaction, the thing I texted you was that I felt like John Wick 1 was 50 Shades of Grey for 14-year-old boys when I first saw it. And which is to say that I thought it was inoffensively silly but pandering directly to a specific audience who are into sort of violent action cinema. And I was once that boy, so I got it. And, you know... I only wish that the sort of enthusiasm that there was from the sort of critical community for this film was equally there for... We lived in a universe where that could be equally true for films about sex, like 50 Shades of Grey, for example. Not to say 50 Shades of Grey is a great film, but I didn't think John Wick 1 was a great film either. But I will say this. When they got into the house showdown in the first film, you know, when people are coming to take...
yes, the first sort of action set piece.
The first action set piece in John Wick 1, I was like, I get the reason why this film was made. Up until that point, I thought it was kind of silly, but, you know, like sort of somewhat captured some zeitgeist moment that had to do with Keanu Reeves and popular culture. But when they got to that first action sequence, I was like, I get why this film was made. I understand what the modus operandi of this film is, which is that it's really, really polished action, and in a way that is kind of breathtaking. And it reminded me of Robert Rodriguez's Desperado. You know, a film that like embraces the sort of tenets of being an action-driven and unapologetically action-driven film. So I kind of like, I took that first film on its own terms, unoffensively enough. The second film, I think the thing is both the second and third film have a runtime of around over 2 hours. And for me, and they do an interesting thing, which is that they take sort of an idea that's in the first film and expand it into a larger world. And for me, what happens is the thing that was sort of cool about the first film was this sort of less is more approach, where the littlest hints you got of this big world were kind of really cool and intriguing.
Yeah, because they never fleshed them out.
And the minute they started fleshing them out, I started finding it pretty tedious.
Yeah.
And this sort of, the approach was that it kind of got this more is more thinking behind John Wick 2 and John Wick 3. And so my reaction to John Wick 3 is very similar to John Wick 2. Although I think my problem is John Wick 3 takes the problems of John Wick 2 and makes them much worse. My issue with John Wick 3 is I found there was a real deadening effect to the action in this movie where I was just exhausted and uninterested the longer action sequences went on. And what you saw happening in the film is that each action set piece got longer and longer and longer, and each of them didn't do anything interesting enough for me to keep engaged. And by the time we got to, so I had the almost exact opposite reaction to the Halle Berry thing, which is that I was kind of interested in Halle Berry's story. There was this thing about, they hinted at her daughter being the reason why she is where she is, and this idea that she doesn't want to know where her daughter is, so she's completely abandoned this one. I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I'm into it. But the second it became a shootout, and the shootout lasted like, it feels like 15 to 20 minutes. It's probably shorter than that, but it just felt like that because it was just so repetitive. I was just clocking out. And there was this sense, for me, I just started clocking out. And then the problem with all of that clocking out was the sort of broader issue about like the place we live in the world right now in relation to gun violence. Now, I don't want to pin this on this film. We're going to be doing a bigger episode about violence in cinema that's much broader. And I, you know, like after I get through my initial thoughts, I kind of want to go into that a little further here just to touch on it. But I found there was just, I don't want to be a hypocrite because I do like action movies. I do like the sort of balletic choreography of action cinema. I love John Woo. I love you know, Desperado, I think, is a, you know, magnificent film.
Yeah.
And I recently rewatched Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon as a sort of an example of action cinema, kind of done in an interesting way. But I just found there's this thing with John Wick 3 particularly, where the action sequences just were deadening. And I just found the longer they went on, the more I was just clocked out. And to describe my feeling in it was, I was just waiting for this film to be over.
Wow.
I wanted to get out of there, and I didn't want to be in the theater much longer. When the film kind of paused to do world building moments where they were kind of talking away, I was kind of getting back into it, but I knew that would just ultimately give way to an action set piece. And I found those so, uninteresting. I think, and to me, it was the pacing problem, because I was like, if these action sequences were about him taking out one person or two people or something like that, I think I could kind of get it, and they were shorter. There was an action sequence at the end where they come up against the guys from the raid, which I was like, I'm kind of into the sort of
interesting
dynamics of this. But when it's just like multiple people being shot in the head and doing the double tap body head thing, I was clocking out.
You know what's so interesting? The fight between the raid dudes, which I liked as well, was the only time I clocked out.
Huh.
Because
that's so fascinating.
Because I was just like, because that to me felt the longest, because it was the same stuff over and over and over again. Smash through a glass thing, disappear. Smash through a glass thing, disappear. Fight. Smash through a glass thing, disappear.
So when when Jacob emailed us in and said we have entirely different cognitive processes,
he's not wrong.
We might actually have entirely different cognitive processes.
You know what I think it might be? I don't enjoy, it's weird, and I do want to get into this when we talk about sort of the larger issue of violence in cinema. Like, case in point, Deadpool, okay?
Directed by David Leitch, who directed the first John Wick.
Yeah.
The second one was directed by David Leitch,
The violence in that, let's even talk about the beginning of the violence in Deadpool 2, is played for like a weird sort of comedy, and it's just there, and it's slow motion, and it's like pure gratuity for gratuity's sake. And I don't particularly, and again, this is for different folks, different strokes. Like, people can enjoy what people want to enjoy. That's something that I've never gravitated towards. I think the reason why I enjoy the action set pieces of John Wick, and John Wick 3 in particular, I'd like to keep from here on out, I'd like to anyway, as much as I can, keep talking about this particular chapter, because I sort of step out of critical sort of story movie mode in these, and I don't do this often in action films, and I enjoy watching and just looking at the technical acumen that it took to pull these things off. And that's why, for instance, the Halle Berry, Keanu Reeves, and Two Dog fight scene between like 100 soldiers, captivated me like no other action set piece has captivated me, because I was like, the difficulty of training these dogs and getting these shots and doing these like amazing sort of I don't even want to, I don't, it's not acrobatics, but like like the choreography involved in that entire sequence, the fact that that's something that had to be trained and be done, like it fascinated me beyond belief. And every time I thought like, well, that's the crescendo of this thing, they did something else. I did find, at least in my opinion, they did get longer and longer and longer, but the only one that didn't pay off the longer and longer and longer set piece with more spectacular stunt work was that fight between the two raid guys and him, and a little bit between him and Zero.
We're clearly spoiling this entire film.
Well, I mean, that they fight, that he fights a bunch of people. We haven't spoiled anything yet. And we'll get into spoilers eventually, because there is a plot here. But I will say this: this is this is where I'm going to swing back and agree with you. The more you learn about the John Wick universe, the less intriguing it is. No question. But here's the weird side rub of this. Again, I go back to Fast and Furious. Fast and Furious shouldn't be more enjoyable because it's dumber, as it gets bigger and bigger and stupider and more ridiculous. Yet I still like it. I still like how silly it gets. And it's that transitional period that like gets me. I'm shifting my enjoyment from one type of thing to another. John Wick 1, I loved the action and I was intrigued. I was really intrigued by the world. How does this work? This is so cool. This is slick. It had like a weird sort of like, I'll even go back even further, like the magic of the setting of the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie before the rest came out.
Mm-hmm.
There was something weirdly magical about it. Like, you didn't know exactly how it works, and this gold is cursed, and like, what's going on? This is like, oh, you do these coins and you do this thing, like, that's cool, and like, oh, reservation for 12. It's like slick and weird and like cool. And as we went through this whole thing and we needed new magical MacGuffins for John Wick to find, and he goes to his home place and he has to, quote, punch his ticket, and he hands in this cross that, and this is going to be a minor spoiler, then becomes a brand, and it makes it so he can never go home again. And like, then he goes to the fucking Casablanca. He's walking in the fucking desert. And I'm just like, okay. Like, and the High Table, which is the villain in this one, the ruling class of assassins, I guess.
You and I really literally had the exact opposite reaction to this movie.
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm acknowledging that it gets dumb.
It's not.
It does, because the more you explain this stuff, the more you realize there's nothing actually behind it, and the mystique goes away.
My thing is here, and I think there's a really great article about this on Bloody Disgusting, by the way, which is that
.com?
Yeah, bloodydisgusting.com. John Wick has killed more people than Jason Voorhees and Mike Myers combined in all of their movies in 3 movies. And I think for me, the issue here is...
He is Baba Yaga.
Is that there is just a deadening effect for me to the violence in this movie, which is that I think it's unevenly paced, and this is one of those situations. I don't dislike what this film is trying to do in principle, and I like action movies. I found my issue is that A, there's a thing with John Wick himself as a character who's become less interesting throughout these films. And then B, I think the issue is those action sequences feel like they're about the action as opposed to moving the story forward. And the same comparable example, and bringing up the Raid again, is I kind of felt the same way about the Raid 2 as I do about this. You know, whereas there's this sort of like escalation of the violence where we're sort of just going for bigger and what can we do that's kind of crazier, you know. And the violence in this is really gratuitous, you know, like what's funny is that this is an R-rated movie, but you know, so it kind of to me it stretches the indignation of what R ratings mean. How so? Well, if they showed a penis for 1 second in a flaccid state, it would be an N17.
Oh, they'd never show an erect penis.
But you can literally stab a person through the eye on screen, and it is okay for kids to come see that as long as you're with your parent.
Yeah.
Again, bigger topic, broader topic. Don't want to weigh that on what this film is.
Sure.
That's the world we live in. But my issue is that I think this comes back to our first episode, Mad Max Fury Road, story through action. You know, we talked a little bit about how action isn't about necessarily just about spectacle. It's about storytelling. And in this case, I found that the storytelling in the action sequences was uninteresting.
Here's the thing, and I think we hit the nail on the head on what we sort of enjoy between, or what I enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy. And I can't say if this is a global thing, but let's just stick with John Wick 3. For me, the action in this film is the story. And by that I mean it's another part of the meta narrative of the creation of this film is the thing that I glom onto, and the edgelordy world building / world breaking stuff is just kind of like a cool frosting. Like
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What's John Wick's arc through part 3?
Oh, John Wick. I mean, I could read the IMDb first and foremost.
You tell me what John Wick's arc is through part 3.
He is trying to survive after going off the reservation, basically, and breaking the rules of the Assassin's
What's
Order.
his story arc? Does he change?
Survival.
Does he change from beginning to end?
No, he has not. He didn't change in the first movie.
That I think what it comes down to is that, and I'm fine kind of with that principle, but it's a really long road to get to nowhere. Is ultimately.
But this is my point. This is exactly what I just said before. The thing I just said is that the story for me, this story, and I never went into it for a story of personal growth. I went into it for action spectacle with a actor I really like, and there's room for that. I do not need, now again, Mad Max Fury Road is exactly what you said. It is story told through action, and that is fucking brilliant. Which film is better? John Wick's, any of them, or Mad Max Fury Road? Mad Max Fury Road.
I think you're getting into this thing of comparison here, which I just want to stop you on right here, because I don't think that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is that this film could do that, but it doesn't, and it's unevenly paced.
But isn't that the act of comparison, what you just said?
And I think what my issue here is that the story is on you're saying the story is the action.
There's a difference between through the action and is the action.
And I think that is the action, the story being the action thing for me is uninteresting here.
And I can't argue with that. I can't argue what you find interesting or don't find interesting. That's not what I'm saying. I was trying to say there are different things either in a film like Fury Road or a film like this that I find interesting and that I find effective. I think they work in different lanes of what I'm experiencing. Right. And again, and it goes back to I want all types of cinema. I want things like this. I want things like Youth. I always go back to Youth. I watch that movie more than I should. I never want all of John Wick, and I'd never want all of Umberto D. Like I want the differences. And this was the sort of the pendulum swing to that end of the spectrum where I was like, again, kind of like we've talked about it before, but like right movie, right time.
Right.
I just, I made an event of it with some friends. We watched the first two. Yeah. They have invited me out to go see the third one, and I was like, oh, like sweet. Yeah. And then we had a great time. We went and had dinner after. We talked about the whole thing. And in a weird, and this is the other thing too, because the story now has lost its myth, and now it is action figures banging together. Like that's what it is.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop us from having conversations being like, well, what does this mean about this thing? Or like, like how is this going to happen with the high table and who's actually there? And like, what does this person being here mean? Like, again, dumb stuff that is set up too quickly and I would say in some points sloppily. But that didn't change the fact that because of the action itself, it elevated the other aspects of the film that were weaker. For me, for the full experience. And I can't say that I was bored by any of that because we talked about a lot of that stuff. I still talk about that stuff with other people.
Right.
And again.
And you are what you're into. My thing here is that I like action movies. I really do.
Yeah.
I genuinely love action movie. I love action cinema. I love the balletic choreography.
Can I ask why? Like, why do you like it?
I love physical choreography. I love watching physical choreography.
And you found the physical choreography here, other than the raid fight, boring?
I found it pretty tedious and deadening, as in I found it to be very loud, for one, just as sort of on a physical level, and I found it to be repetitive in a way that was kind of uninteresting. And the longer they went on, the more I was just wanting this to be over. And I appreciate the sort of design of this film. I appreciate the sort of world building. I actually really like the way that story elements are kind of introduced in a sort of very light touch way and then expanded upon later. I think that was kind of brilliant about the first one. But there's something about this this jumping from set piece to set piece that ultimately is the same as the previous set piece, and not being that different, that kind of just had this like overall deadening effect. And like to count it, he kills more people. It's imagine if Halloween was just going from mass murder to mass murder to mass murder to mass murder without any of the sort of escalation or anything like that. That's kind of where I felt it was deadening.
I mean, the difference being, there's a couple differences between those two sort of, again, we're getting more into comparison stuff, but like a reason why John Wick 1 worked for me was that the trope of why the revenge was happening was more complex than usual.
And also the balance of that film is kind of
it's way more balanced.
Yeah, it's
No question.
way, like we're just not jumping from the sit piece comes in 45 minutes into the movie.
Of course.
And you're kind of like it escalates towards the end.
But I don't think the and maybe it warrants more discussion, but I don't think the equation of like, well, John Wick murdered more people than monsters did is relevant irrelevant in a did you enjoy this film for the action or not sense. It's definitely relevant in the conversation of violence in cinema. Yes.
That's okay. So the reason I brought that up is that there is just for me, the problem here is that this is a film where I think the sort of idea that's going on here is let's give you more, but the more is less interesting to me than what I liked about the first one, which is the less is more kind of expression.
And I am not disagreeing with you with the fact that is exactly what they are doing. I am just saying I am able in my interest to transition to still be on board, where I can totally see someone like you that enjoys certain aspects of the first one being like, and okay, like I understand that.
And then again, I don't want to pin the sort of sense of that in the world, but there is something about the fetishization of gun violence in this movie that is, in my mind, just a little trickier to swallow. And I don't want to say,
sure,
like I think, like Hard Boiled, like John Woo's film Hard Boiled with Chow Yun-fat doing sort of gun fu kind of thing, can be beautiful and interesting. But there is something about the sort of way in which this film, I think, is fetishizing gun violence, and it's and I think I would be on board for the idea that films can do this and we should be able to do this, and there is a beauty in this if the film was balanced in a different way. But it's so heavily balanced in one direction that I was just kind of like, I'm nodding my head up and down as I'm watching the movie, going
right,
okay, cool, and there's so much violence coming at you, and I'm like, again, I think violence should be, like filmmakers should explore violence, and violence in cinema, it has the potential to be cathartic and beautiful and wonderful, and we should not in any way reject it outright on the basis that we shouldn't see violence. I don't think that's how violence works in cinema. But there's a thing in this particular film that the only way I can describe it has this deadening quality to me.
If we're going back to sort of the horror movie versus John Wick thing, right? I think a reason, I want to talk through this because
I'm not rejecting your enjoyment of the film. A lot of people enjoy this movie.
I'm trying to further understand why my enjoyment exists and why I have problems with certain things or certain films, and like I don't have it in here or like that sort of thing. That's the sort of conversation I know what I feel. I think it's interesting to explore why I feel a certain way, right?
Let's get down on the couch. Let's do this.
Okay, so horror films. Let's go with any of the big monster, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, etc. Those films are violent, and obviously the kill count is lower. But I would say something that I don't resonate with, and I know a lot of people do, is gore.
Right.
I don't love seeing torsos like sawed off or like people ripped out of a thing, like that sort of thing, and whatever, like horror movie gore. And it's weird, like
because this movie has a lot of that.
But here's the thing: I won't call John, and maybe this is me being desensitized too. John Wick 3, I don't think is gory. I think it's incredibly violent.
Really? So when he hatchets a guy in the head, or when he stabs a guy through the eye.
Gore to me is, and again, this is my definition. I don't know, how this would play out, but like gore to me is like basically reveling in the insides being the outsides. That's what gore. And of course, I'm talking about a human being,
right?
But like that's what I classify as gory, and like that I will be like, oh fuck, like I don't know, and it doesn't. It has never worked well or made any enjoyment in any sort of horror sort of genre thing for me.
Right.
I mean, look again. I am not trying to disavow any of the incredible, like, intense violence of this film.
And you even described it as there's a kind of a celebration of the violence in the audience, right? There's a celebration of it.
But something I think that this film actually does, and all of them really do well, is the more violent deaths are... I was going to say weighed more, but I don't think that's it. Are harder fought to get.
Right.
The moments where there's a hatchet or a blade or something going in an eye or any of those things, 9 times out of 10, there is a real hard physical struggle before that moment. There's a lot of quick death. I mean, it's literally
a lot of machine gun death in this movie.
Yeah. But I think when it does sort of step its foot into this, like, this is going to be visceral for you, it slows down in John Wick terms to a point where it's like, this is more intense.
I guess the thing is here, my issue is,
I love how we haven't talked about the plot at all. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't think we're gonna get to, because we've got a fundamental difference of opinion on why the film works for one of us and doesn't work for the other person. Is fundamentally, I think there is I really like the writer, Derek Kolstad. I really like him. I really like what he did in the first movie. I really like the sort of choreography of the first film. I really like all of that.
It's been the same writer for...
They've added writers to it now. And this is a tricky phrasing to put it. I'm not sure this film appeals to our better angels, because I don't know if the directors or the filmmakers involved are kind of interested in... I think the film could be exactly the same film, but have a sense of it feels like what we're showing off here is how many people can die and how indestructible John Wick can be. And I feel like that gets uninteresting. That's my issue.
I don't think I think what you've just described sounds uninteresting. I don't think that's I don't think that's the entire story, at least again what I experienced. There's definitely angles of that, no question. If that was just it, I think I would be...
And the problem for me is that I think that happens because of the balance of the film. It's not, like, I think, like you said, there's this moment where they're talking about Halle Berry's daughter, and if I don't need to see that story, but if I need to, if I felt that what Halle Berry was doing through the remainder of that action sequence had to do with that story, then I would feel kind of more comfortable with it. So but what's happening is that it's just kind of becomes carnage.
Well, but here's the thing, and this is where the mystery machine of the mechanics of the Assassin Society actually plays against it, I think, for you, is because if we want to break down the exact here's what happens and why, the only reason Halle Berry helps John Wick is we find out through the sort of meta narrative, or not the meta, just the narrative of the story, that John Wick is the reason why her daughter is safe, and she owes him a debt due to those stupid coins with the blood and the thumbprints, right? So the silly mechanics of the world are the narrative structure that binds Halle Berry's character to Keanu Reeves, to John Wick, right? So in a way, the story has done its due diligence to be like, it makes sense, she has to do this. There's a whole second movie about John Wick having to do a thing because of these stupid coins. That, it seems to you, is not enough to warrant. You'd want, and again, I don't think you want to see the story of the daughter and all that stuff, but there's something where you are not willing to hand wave away, I guess, character building at the to further expand an action sequence.
So it's an action sequence that seems to be in and of itself, about the sort of choreography of it itself, where you sort of forget why Halle Berry's there. And again, I think it just comes down to balance. Like, I think if that scene, and this is just sort of a perfunctory way to kind of examine it, but if it was shorter and we were more direct about what Halle Berry had to do to get out of this sequence, or the sort of dynamics of why she has to get out of the sequence. And we saw the kind of...
But we knew that.
We see the kind of bigger struggle that she's fighting with in that sequence. But it's not that, because it becomes this, like,
but it's not
mass
about
carnage.
Yeah, but none of that is about her. It's about her repaying a debt, and this is how she's doing it.
But he becomes uninteresting. Like, John Wick becomes uninteresting to me in that scene, and she's uninteresting to me in that scene.
But it's not because of the mechanic.
It's because the scene becomes just this sort of, like, just carnage, and here's the thing as well, is that if that scene, for example, existed in a vacuum, and say the build, it's just that by the time we get to that scene, we've had kind of 3 scenes like that, and then there's going to be 4 more scenes like that by the time we get to the end of the movie. And so there's this kind of, like, lessening effect of everything, and it just keeps compounding itself.
I think the issue I take with, and it's not much really, but the only issue I take with your sort of description is describing it as just carnage. And the reason I take that as a little bit wrong is because by just saying that, we're taking away one of the fundamental tenets of why I think this film works and is enjoyable, in the fact that to make that scene is incredibly non-chaotic. Like, yes, it has a feeling of chaos in it, but the construction of it and how I'm like, holy shit, how did they do this?
In all the episodes we've ever done, have I ever said anything to say that we should dissuade the difficulty in making a film and how well this is produced?
No, but I'm saying
this movie is really well made.
No, but what I'm saying is I'm not saying that one of it is right or wrong. I'm saying I am enjoying there's enough holes of things going on, and the weight of both of these things, of both the story of the film and then me watching sort of and being in awe of how the film is being made, is a very nice balance for me.
Right, and for me,
it's not
balanced. And there, like, the only way I can describe it is deadening.
And here's the thing, and this is something I don't want to, and I don't think this is a perfect analogy, but the film is still fresh in my mind with Long Day's Journey into Night. I mean, the fact of the matter is, while I absolutely loved the 59-minute shot, there are parts of that are deadening. Mm-hmm. There are parts of that are, I'm just like, okay, like, I get it. But it's also like, but when those things happen in that sequence, I'm like, oh my God, they had to shift the camera onto an actual moving, fuck. And then it's me for like 5 minutes of the camera just moving slow. I'm like, they just did that thing. They just did that thing behind the camera that I don't know. I kind of get how they did it, but I don't get how they did it. And it's the similar sort of feeling in these action sequences of John Wick, which are, again, constructed entirely different. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it's those, when the scenes have the parts where I'm like, okay, move on. It always fills it with something or a shot or a thing where I'm like, holy fuck. They did a scene with John sliding across the ground, Halle Berry jumping over a car, and 2 dogs leaping off walls at the same time. Like, a lot of it just constantly blew my mind as to what was possible in an action shot. And that's sort of why, that's what filled my time.
And I get that was kind of enough for you. my like, and if we're going to do comparisons, like let's talk about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which has a number of action set pieces.
Sure.
But all of them feel dynamic, and they're all about story and character, and they're still exciting to watch, and they're incredibly balletic, and there are moments of like, wow, this is happening. And again, I think the first film really, you know, like captures that, like to the point where when I saw that first like set piece, I was like, yeah, I know why. And these guys are really good at this, and they've really figured out and want to show us something really cool, new, and exciting. It's now by the time we get to movie 3, and that's kind of what we've been doing. And they don't feel like they're varying it up very much. I'm in awe of Keanu Reeves' endurance. Like the physicality he brings to the film should be talked about in the same vein as Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Without a doubt, I think the movie has kind of captured somehow, without having to give him much dialogue, this sort of Zen-like quality that he has been, sort of that has been a mark of his character as an actor for a long time.
There's a lot of Zen-like quality going on in this thing.
Yeah, and so and then I think the other thing is as well, the other direction you could take it in, that I would be equally sort of like if this was the film that we call, is like the film also doesn't have its tongue in its cheek about any of this. It's very deadly serious.
I would disagree.
Really?
I think they've gotten sillier as it's gone, and not that all the characters do it, but even I'm going to go back to Zero.
He does
played by Mark Dacascos.
Iron Chef himself.
It's so
he's the breath of fresh air that I needed in this movie. I needed, he was the thing that I was like, I'm here for you.
There's always been a weird thing where like everyone's either scared of John Wick or respects John Wick, and this is a character of Zero, the assassin that the adjudicator, who also was I don't want to say was like perfectly non-interesting. Like the point that I really want, like you're supposed to be this over-governing body of like you're not supposed to quite understand it. Played by Asia Kate Dillon,
the adjudicator.
Yeah. But she goes and hires Zero and his group to go kill John Wick for the $14 million bounty, and Zero is not only a respectful, I guess, foil, but he's a fanboy.
Yeah.
And there's something like, again, sort of taking it to that ridiculous next level that took me. I mean, honestly, look, and then you take that plus him having to walk through the desert and finding like a mythical person like that's part of the high table and like all that shit. Like it's like, yeah, you're jumping 9 sharks. Like I get it.
I guess there's an interesting thing there that has to do. There's a thing about this film, it harkens back to like the 80s kind of action cinema, like very much of Arnold Schwarzenegger's kind of period, and which has to do with this otherization of foreignness. That this film kind of, touches upon slightly, like there's every ethnic group has their own sort of, every group that is coming at him is bound by and defined by an ethnicity. And it is kind of defined sort of as an otherness, whereas Wick is the normality of this whole thing. And
because the Russian influence was so prevalent in the first one, and you find out in this one that he's actually from that sort of Russian family.
Sort of it's not quite like it's not quite True Lies, for example, but it's kind of, it just feels like we're sort of getting into that ballpark. And I guess maybe there's, for me, is a sense of the carnage is so much so that people come on and feel like fodder. Like they feel kind of like war fodder when people when and the example is when the Continental is raided at the end, and there's just these faceless masks that turn up, and it's just this sort of, again, it lasts for so long of just like carnage and it's repetitive carnage and
I didn't find it repetitive. That's
like,
the thing.
I really like, for example, I really like Lance Henrik as an actor. He from The Wire,
and I love him in these movies.
I feel like I want to see what he's doing in these scenes.
I thought he got a lot. I was glad to see him in action.
We see him for a minute, and then he's kind of gone. And then like suddenly, like towards the end, he was like, "Oh yeah, he's out there doing stuff." Look. I don't want to take away from people's enjoyment of the film. People are clearly enjoying this film. Is making so much money. It is the conversation touch point that people are kind of bringing to this thing. I find that there is something sort of disquietingly deadening about it. That's the best way I can describe it. I feel there's a sort of like, yeah, like Mark Dacascos, Iron Chef's kind of presence kind of alleviated that for me, and he was kind of the ingredient I started feeling like I needed more.
He was peppers. He was red peppers.
He was red peppers. Yeah, and it's just this balance in this film that just feels like we're giving you more is more.
And I think that while I agree with the ratios you've given, I think if we're gonna keep going with the Iron Chef stuff, the thing that I'm sad that and not sad, I don't know, I enjoyed so much, and I wish you did as well, is the secret ingredient of that is the actual action itself, and knowing as I've seen the progression of these films, why I'm watching these films.
Right.
The first one was kind of a shock to the system. It was a semi-moving, incredibly skilled action movie, which had, like, I won't say like deep character growth, but it had an arc of emotional understanding to it that I was not used to in this style of film, which made it feel fresh. The second one takes that, but then doesn't quite keep it moving enough, but ramps the spectacle up where I'm like, oh, I know where this is going, and I'm still enjoying it. And by the time I got to this one, I'm like, oh, this is just going to be balls to the wall action with hokey but still cool set dressing and a B-movie plot in the back of it that I'm still like, oh my God, what's Ian McShane gonna do? Like, so I've been as I've been going on this roller coaster, I've seen the turns and the things coming up, and I've never been disappointed because I know what I'm going for.
Right.
If this movie, if for whatever reason the press of this movie or the trailers or whatever like made it seem like the most emotional journey for John Wick, and we're really gonna get into like what, like beyond the wife and the dog and like all that stuff, and then I saw this movie, I'd be like, fuck you, movie. But that's not what they're selling me, and that's not what I'm expecting. And I just
You're in for the ride.
I'm in for the ride. And this is sort of going to bring it back a little bit to more of a a business perspective, but I'm an educated consumer.
Right.
It's not lying to me. And I know what I'm getting, and it ups. So I got more than I thought I would out of it.
Yeah.
And I really like this conversation, and while I want you to enjoy films, I'm kind of pumped that you didn't, because here's the thing. We could go, if you say you love this movie, we would just be going back and forth about the technicalities of it, and maybe one or two like neat sort of like, oh, and this is an interesting aspect of the Assassin's Guild.
Right.
That's not an interesting conversation. Like,
yeah.
Again, it's a fun conversation. I enjoyed having that conversation with my friends over dinner. That's not something I particularly want to record and put out on the internet, because who gives a shit?
Right.
What I like is sort of what we're doing and trying to dissect. I mean, I don't even think we're trying. You're very, what's the word I'm looking for? You're very clear with what and how you enjoy things like this, and how you didn't enjoy this because of A, B, and C. And that's all very clear to me. I'm enjoying sort of that being the foil to me, and trying to figure out why all of those reasons didn't affect me, and what is the reason why I still enjoyed it. And I think I kind of did through this conversation.
You're very clear about what you enjoy and what you like. And I think, as I've always said, I don't want to be the dampener on anyone's party about this movie.
You don't want to make it moist?
I don't want to sweat into your pad and make this all moist and a mushy mess that you have to squish up into a ball and hold, and potentially have to throw at someone if you have to escape a scenario.
John Wick 4.
John Wick 4.
Moist mess.
Yeah, the moist paper towel. I'm kind of. I'm happy for Keanu Reeves to have. I think there's a thing when you get to an actor of his age, in terms of like finding a franchise that can sustain you for many years to come. I do remember, like the thing about Keanu Reeves is his early career. Keanu Reeves was painted as a sort of dim but beautiful man, and you have to think about him appearing in Much Ado About Nothing, him appearing in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then
Bill and Ted.
kind of playing off basically Bill and Ted kind of followed him around for a long period of time. And it took him, I think, Speed to kind of shake it. And then The Matrix to kind of really create this new sort of persona out of it. And I don't, what's cool about him is that I don't feel like any of this is manufactured. I feel like it is a sort of authentic representation of who he is. He seems like a very genuine person. The sad Keanu meme is very true.
But every interaction I've ever heard of from him, and that, what's interesting. Sorry, I don't want to cut. There's just a quick aside, but it's also to your point. I think because it's Keanu Reeves is another reason why it works for me.
Yeah, there's a connection between the sort of sense of zen that I think kind of plays to the sort of character of John Wick, the kind of haunted assassin. And obviously Keanu's actual true story is plays into that. We won't talk too much about that.
But he's had some stuff happen to him.
Yeah. And so I really like Keanu. I really liked that first. I sort of felt that that first film kind of pandered in exactly the right way I wanted it to pander. And I think what's happening here is that we're for me, the cake is being overstuffed into my mouth, and I'm kind of feeling a little distaste, about the whole thing.
It's going 9 Fast, 9 Furious on you.
Yeah, exactly. But I brought a book here about violence in American cinema that I wanted to read a quote from, but I don't think it applies now, and we'll talk about this later.
I think, I'm looking forward to that podcast.
In our violence, we've been planning an episode about violence in cinema for a while, but I just can't. And I'm not going to deny the feeling that the longer this thing went on, the more I just kind of was hoping it to vary up in tone and to vary up in pace and to kind of surprise me instead of just sort of seemingly bash me over the head repeatedly. And I have a high tolerance for very long, uninteresting films. I have a very high tolerance. I can watch very long, very slow pieces of cinema. And the problem here isn't what the genre, and it isn't the technicalities, and it isn't the people involved, and it isn't the style. It's the lack of variation to what this thing is at this point.
I see, and that again, we've gone back and forth. I don't want to keep going. I was going to say, I would say that I disagree with the lack of variation. That's the only thing, because I did feel like not only did the scenes vary, but they escalated according. Again, just for my taste, and I totally get that they didn't for you. But overall. I dug the hell out of this conversation. We're, just full disclosure, listeners at home, we're doing this very, very late in the evening, and I'm surprised how cognizant and kind of good job us.
I hope we're like that on most episodes.
No, we are not.
If depending on which side of the coin you land on. You should email us in, because I really feel like I'm going to be sailing in the only boat in this direction on this movie, as far as I've read. Please email us in at onlymoviepodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Twitter at onlymoviepod with your feelings about John Wick. And I know this is going to be a film that generates a lot of conversation in our Twitter and via our email. And I'm very interested to see if anyone can change my feelings about it.
Well, if I can't, I don't know. No.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been the only podcast about the film John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum.
Parabellum.
Shahir, when you are not casting a life buoy out into the sea of the internet to see if someone can save your 2.5 hours when you watch this film for your enjoyment factor, where can folks find you?
You can find me sailing alone into the wild at my website, www.shahirdaud.com. That's SHAHIRDAUD. Matt, when you are climbing from a rooftop to jump down into an entire barrage of enemies for which you can bat away with a single critical thought for over an hour, where can people find you?
You can find me thinking I'm back rolling nat 20s at MATTHEWKROL.com for my life and works. Also, Skeletor, the number 4, PREC on Instagram and PSN, and Emperor MSK on Twitter. Also, go check out our good works over at The old extra credits machine. Again, I pitched it last time, but it actually came out the day of the recording. We did a wonderful episode on the cool shove effect and how it affects cinema, but also how it could be used with gaming. So go check that stuff out. And with that, next week we are covering a good old-fashioned Netflix film.
Yeah, we can even say it right now. If you are, if you have Netflix, which I presume you do, please check out Stefan Bristol's film "See You Yesterday."
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
You are saying it
Not
correct.
"See You Nexterday."
No.
"See You Yesterday."
See you next day. Yeah, I'm pumped to talk about that too. I got lots of stuff.
We got lots of stuff to talk about there. As always, email us in. Loved having you. Please don't get shot.
He's loved having you.
Loved having you listen to us. You know how you said we were kind of cognizant? It's all falling apart.
I'm thinking we're gonna go to sleep.